So this is a talk on the so-called hard problem in science, the most difficult problem in science, the question that we cannot answer actually. It's of course a hard problem because we cannot answer it, but at the same time it's not too hard because there are only two solutions, there are only two options, there are only two answers. So, and many times scientists um, does it a little bit more difficult than what it is simply because of the thing that very often happens to scientists and to professors and to researchers. We get lost in discourse, we get lost in thought, in discourse, in minute details that actually belongs to a certain kind of discourse, a paradigm, a way of thinking, a way to approach things. But actually, it is quite easy to lay it out, to make it visible and comprehensible and clear for people. And clarity is the only quality in science and in philosophy. Clarity is the only intellectual quality, is the deepest and most undisputable value. Clarity is the highest value in intellectual endeavors. That's just how it is. I think only Schopenhauer was able to say it in a nice and clear way, but it's of course really true. But only clear minds, only professionals know that it's really true. Clarity is the only true value of science, philosophy, or anything, but of course, especially when it comes to understanding cognition and intellectual matters. So, consciousness. There are two different options. There are two different answers to the so-called hard question: where does consciousness come from and why does it exist? This is the deepest and the most difficult question to answer for scientists. And of course, it's so difficult that it's practically not possible to answer it. Maybe one day it will be possible, but at least not now. So the two solutions, the two different answers is like this. The first answer is that consciousness is simply created by the brain. This is the biological answer, which 85 to 90% of every scientist believes, I would think. Consciousness is created by the brain. Consciousness is created by the interaction between everything that happens in the nervous system and the brain, the interaction between the nervous system and the brain, which means that consciousness is created by electromagnetic energy and by neurochemicals and neurotransmitters in the brain, the so-called proteins and fluids and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. In short, consciousness is a result of the activity in the brain. Consciousness is a result of the interaction between the nervous system and the brain. Consciousness is constituted by the nervous system and the brain, and by the electromagnetic energy, the activity between synapses in the neural circuitry of the brain, a result of neurochemicals, neurotransmitters, everything that is in the brain. It's a result of the soup in the brain. It's a result of the activity in the brain. Consciousness is a result of electric and electromagnetic energy and interaction between everything that is inside the brain. That's the first answer. We can all understand it. Consciousness comes from the brain. The second answer, the second option, is that consciousness simply exists. And consciousness is not dependent on physical bodies or on physicality, which means that we are something that exists in consciousness. We take part in consciousness. Consciousness is the same as internet, you could say. So the only thing that you need in order to become conscious is connection to the internet, and the brain is such a connection, we could say. Maybe we don't even need a connection, because consciousness is just there. So when the body die, when we die, when I die, consciousness as such do not die, does not change because of my physical body that I die. But I will disappear from consciousness because there is no antenna, or there is no connection to the internet anymore, to the consciousness anymore. So the first answer is that consciousness is dependent on its origination, and its origination is the body, is the brain, is the nervous system. It's everything that happens electrochemically, electromagnetically in the brain. The second thing is that consciousness is not dependent on the body. So consciousness is simply something that exists, and we take part. Everything that lives takes part in consciousness, or at least every being or every animal or plant or whatever that has the ability to connect to the internet, that has the ability to connect to consciousness, receives consciousness from the source of consciousness, which is and exists independent of the body itself. So these are the two answers. There is something about consciousness that is not dependent on the body. You know, that is one of the assumptions in science, and we can never know this because we can never perform an experiment about it, because there has never existed a scientist in this world who can perform an experiment from the position of being outside of consciousness. That's, of course, simply just not possible, right? So you need consciousness in order to do research on consciousness. So if the first answer is correct, that consciousness is created by the body, then you will have no possibility to determine the origins of consciousness, simply because you will always be in consciousness because of your body, and when you make the assumption or the conclusion that consciousness is not dependent on the body, you have observed something in your experiment that proves that consciousness is not dependent on the body, then that is simply just not possible to determine. It's just not simply not possible to do that or to say that, because you are already observing from the point of consciousness. You are already observing from the point of consciousness because your own consciousness is constituted by the body that creates the consciousness. So it's not possible to make an experiment from the position of being outside of consciousness. That's simply not possible. At least not until now. Who knows if it is possible in the future? We never know. Paradigms change because of technology, basically. So, I mean, and everything is technology. Even thinking is a kind of technology. So discourse is an instrument for modifying technology, you could say, in some sense. But anyway, so the conclusion in this talk here is that we don't know. We cannot know. It's simply just not possible to know whether the first answer is correct or if the second answer is correct. We just cannot determine that. If there is something about consciousness that is not dependent on the physical body that creates consciousness, we simply don't know. We simply don't know. and we have no ability to know, because we are always in the consciousness that is already created by our bodies, by our own brain. So we cannot know that. And we cannot make an experiment that from a position of outside of consciousness. That's just not possible. So I would say that 90% of scientists believe that consciousness is something that is generated, produced, and constituted by the activity in the brain and nervous system, on the interaction therein, and of course, especially the brain. But because the brain is a part of the nervous system, we can say that consciousness is produced and constituted by activity in the brain. 90% of scientists believe that, and maybe 10% think that consciousness may be interdependent of the bodies that produce it. That is not actually necessary to have a brain in order to be conscious. There is, but that doesn't actually exclude the conclusion, because even if you don't have a brain, there might be some atomic, nuclear, electromagnetic energy within the body of your being that constitutes and generates consciousness. So if it is just a matter of electromagnetic forces that ignites and creates and constitutes consciousness, then of course mosquitoes and flies and everything, insects, things like that, are conscious, which is very easy to think. It's very easy to think that insects have consciousness. I absolutely think that insects have consciousness. I think a mosquito has consciousness. I think an ant has consciousness. But we don't know if that consciousness is created by their so-called brain, or if it is constituted by the electromagnetic energy that exists in their body field, so to speak, in their particle body field, or if it is because they connect to the internet or to the consciousness, same as we do. We don't know that. Anyway, this talk was just to make it clear about what kind of answers we have to the original consciousness. It was just to make it a little bit more clear about how we view the different answers to where consciousness comes from and why it exists at all. Okay.